What's up, guys? This is the Acing Podcast. My name is Arneet Singh, and I'm your host. First of all, thank you if you did listen to the last episode that I did with director Ned Record from Hollywood Shakespeare, whose new movie, The Dark Places, is coming out on Amazon very soon. Ned and I recorded for like 2 hours the other day, and in the first episode we talked about the new movie and the fact that it was filmed completely during quarantine in April, the craziness through Zoom, and it's a really creative endeavor that not a lot of people could have pulled off, but he did, and so make sure to check it out when it comes out. The other part of the podcast that we did was talking about some of our favorite rewatchable movies, such as The Fall, Knives Out, Snakes on a Plane, and many more. So if you want to hang out with two cinephiles who love movies and can talk about the philosophy regardless of its prestige, check this one out. You're going to have a lot of fun. And without further ado, on to part two. The other reason that I wanted to bring you onto the podcast is because one of the things that you and I have always gelled on, always been able to talk like literally for hours about, is movies and movie history, and not just about whether we were entertained by them or not, but like really dive into the nitty gritty. And I think one of the things that a lot of people are turning to during quarantine just for a sense of comfort is movies they've already seen. Like, forget about Tiger King and all the other stuff that streaming sites are pumping out to get viewership on new content. The movies that we love are the ones that we're going to because they give us a sense of relief, a sense of home. And so you and I kind of bounced around talking about a couple of movies that we wanted to talk about. And I thought we could just go through it. Like, what's better than talking about shit we've seen a million times? We know it inside and out. And let's start with the first one, which is actually a movie that you turned me on to, The Fall.
I turned a lot of people onto that one.
Yeah, Tarsem Singh directed, starring Lee Pace, who is maybe one of the most underrated actors of his generation. I think you and I can agree on that.
Oh no, I need to get famous just so I can cast it.
He's so good. Me and my mom started watching *Halt and Catch Fire* a couple of weeks ago, and I mean, first of all, I didn't realize he was 6'5". He's a large human being. Secondly, that voice has so much gravitas.
Yeah,
it's deep, it's commanding, it's oh my god. But The Fall is one of the most beautiful movies I've ever watched. Tell the people about it.
It kicks off this topic that when Arneet was like, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, I want to talk about the rewatchability of movies, because I feel like so many movies I see, I'll watch once, go, oh, that was great. And then I start watching them a second time and I just turn them off. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And the more I think about them, the more I start hating them. I'll use Moulin Rouge as a perfect example of a movie that I loved it in the theater. I laughed. I cried. Mm-hmm. Someone's like, let's watch it again. And I was like, yeah. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, that was really stupid. That was stupid.
Yeah, The Fall is definitely one of those movies. It keeps you talking as you're going away.
Yeah, so you keep talking about it afterwards, and you want to go back and watch it again. Most of what Christopher Nolan does is like this as well, where it's like, I feel like it's not just, Christopher Nolan's, I feel there's a difference. I feel like Christopher Nolan movies, you want to watch them again because you know you missed something. But the stuff I put on the list for us to talk about are movies that, no, the film ended, you got it.
Yeah.
But then when you watch it again, you see something else.
Yeah.
You see it from a whole new perspective. I remember when Fight Club first came out, I saw it 4 times in the theater, and I saw a different movie each time I watched it.
That 100%, I gel with that. I definitely, one of those movies for me is Ocean's 11. I have watched that movie so many times. When I first moved to New Zealand, there were no laptops, I didn't have a computer or anything. And the one DVD that wasn't scratched from the move that I could watch on my mobile DVD player, because those were things back in the day, kids. Portable DVD players were a thing in the mid-2000s. Ocean's 11 was the only one that wasn't scratched. And for every night, I'm not kidding you, for the first 6 months of me living there, every night I watched Ocean's 11. Whether I fell asleep with it or I watched the whole thing, I can quote it. I can blah, blah, blah. But the most important thing is I keep picking up like these little, not just acting choices or line choices or whatever, the direction and the visual style and the music cues. And like, there's these little things that you start thinking about in a completely different way where you're like, oh no, but what if that's what they meant to do? This is what they're trying to evoke. And this is what they're trying to lead you to, because the very next thing is about, there's like an inherent joy in watching a movie where you know what's coming next.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that is probably what feeds into the rewatchability of a movie like The Fall. And I definitely like the other thing, because we were going to talk about cinematography in film, but we decided to do this instead. The Fall is a beautifully shot movie.
Absolutely.
The color choices, man. Like,
well,
what?
For me, it's so the basic plot of The Fall is that this Hollywood stuntman who injured himself is in a hospital and befriends this little Romanian girl. She works in California with her family as migrant orange pickers. And she fell, broke her arm, and is in the same hospital. And he starts telling her the story. It takes place in two worlds, in this 1920s silent film era hospital, and also in the world of the story he's telling. It's fascinating because partway through, you start looking around and going, hey, you know, all of the characters in the story he's telling are also bit parts in our 1930s world.
Yep.
And by the end, you realize you're hearing the story through his voice, but seeing it through her eyes. So what does a young girl who didn't grow up in America see these things?
What does she imagine?
Yeah. So then you watch it a second time, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, he's just telling a Western. Yeah. He's talking about the evil sheriff, and he talks about the Indian chief, but she's from Europe. So Indian chief means a guy with a Sikh turban, and his defining trait is based off of what she has seen. Yeah. And the same thing with, you know, one of the other cowboys, she just thinks the guy is a pirate because he doesn't have a leg, and that's all she pictures. But then you just see the whole movie completely differently, because now you're like going from the beginning going, if this is through her eyes, what else are we seeing?
It's the contrast of an adult sense of experience, and I guess like even a level of darkness and depression mixed with the pure joy and free-flowing imagination of a child, the innocence of a child. Those two things don't feel like they would mesh that well together, because we've seen that story before in so many other styles. But for whatever reason, it created this beautiful dreamscape where nothing but also everything somehow made sense.
Well, and I really do view Tarsem Singh as a hero of mine, because he made this as a passion project for multiple reasons. Because The Cell was his big one before that, and I thought The Cell was a beautiful movie. Really brought in a lot of, like, you could see the attention to modern art elements that he drew from when he did this, and it was great. But he got accused of over relying on visual effects, so he made this entire film
for that purpose.
Yeah, and he's like, everything's a practical effect. Everything is on location. There's no fake sets that I build up. Yeah. He spent 3 years of his life taking films or taking commercials that he'd be like, yep, well, we got to shoot this in Peru. They're like, oh, okay. It's like, great. Why? He's like, yeah, it just has to be done in Peru. So he'd shoot in Peru, and then while he was down there, he would fly those cast members he needed down to Peru.
Right.
And go, we got to shoot for like 3 days. The equipment's here. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
And one of my favorite shots, I think the fact that the location was so desolate, deserted, monochrome. My favorite shot is the red scarf, that blood red scarf flying up in the air. And just, I don't know, like anytime I think of that movie, I think of that, and I think of the blood spilled, but also the romance of it, and you know, Tarsem Singh's love for the story, and like there's just a multitude of things you can draw from that film, just specifically from the visual style.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would put that under rewatchable. The movie that I really wanted to talk about on the list that you put together was Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim is my shit. It's so good. Michael Cera is amazing. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is sexy as hell. This is where we get our first real like acting chop Brie Larson look, and realize how much range this girl's got. Like, we knew she could do Captain Marvel before she was even considered. We knew she was going to win an Oscar just based on this performance. This movie is balls off the walls, crazy. When I watched this movie the first time, I didn't realize what I was getting myself into.
I don't think anyone did. I mean, maybe people that read the comic books, but I hadn't, or graphic novel, but I was familiar with its existence, but not with it. I had never seen it or read it, so...
I think even at the time, like, or actually, especially at that time, because the movie came out in 2009, I think it was, that was around a time where we didn't trust the comic book to film adaptation process, because a lot of them have been letdowns or mediocre at the very least. But like, this movie was, I think, one of the first movies I watched where the visual style was really, like, it was kind of a precursor to Into the Spider-Verse. And that kind of idea of bringing like a comic visual style and sensibility to a film and making it work.
Well, making it work, exactly, because Ang Lee did it with the first Hulk, but it was like, how did you make this boring?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Ang Lee, 2-time best director at the Oscars, and we didn't want him back for Hulk.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I loved Life of Pi. I think it's a beautiful movie. Very few times does a book turn into a movie and I go, yeah, that's what I wanted to see.
Yeah, exactly.
It worked that way with that. It worked that way with Ender's Game.
No, and Edgar Wright, who directed it, the same guy who did Shaun of the Dead, the same guy who did Baby Driver, the same guy who almost did a cut of Ant-Man that I still would love to see at some point. That felt like that was a marriage made in hell.
Bill and Chris Lord's Solo, like, Ron Howard's great and all, but they were right to make that movie. And
Marvel, a lot of missed opportunities, guys. What are y'all doing? Why are you driving away your creatives? Come on now, give us what we want. No, but Scott Pilgrim is, for those of you who don't know, is a story about a guy who is down on his luck but ends up meeting this really enigmatic, kind of really cool girl who, it turns out later, has a secret past of relationships that all come back to haunt him just as he's getting into her.
And what's great about that is that it's literally what you just defined. If no one has seen this movie and they hear this,
they're like, what the fuck?
No, it just sounds like every other indie film that's ever been made by that description. But then you add the fact that it's told entirely through video game metaphors.
And with video game visual cues, too.
Exactly.
The 7 deadly X's are like the bosses in video games, and every time he defeats one of them, coins drop out of the air. And the best part of it is, it's Canadian, so it's loonies and toonies dropping on the ground. Like, how do you... Whatever lab they concocted the screenplay in, I want to be a fly on the wall, go back in time, be a fly on the wall, and see what those conversations were like.
You know, Edgar Wright is one of those directors, too, where it's the same thing with Tarsem Singh. You know, we talked about 2-time Best Picture winner Ang Lee, and we've seen it from some other people, but, you know, or same with Wes Anderson, too. I don't think we've seen their film yet. They're still so busy exploring, but the potential... I mean, and don't get me wrong, I think they're great films, but when that right script comes along, these people are going to sweep.
Yeah.
You know, it's just...
And everybody's going to be behind the ball, and we're like, what have they done before? Like, we've been there from the moment we knew they were good. It's kind of like everybody who was into Bong Joon-ho films and not afraid of international films before Parasite came out. You know? Like, we watched the Oscars this year, and yes, we were excited that he won Best Director and Best Picture. But like, we also knew this was an eventuality. This was going to happen.
I feel like at least people in the industry, it's when those guys win, it feels like one of us won.
Yeah.
Because Snowpiercer felt like one of our movies. Like, it's like, oh, I would have made that film.
Yeah, because it comes from a mind that's like ours, where it's like, oh, what is like this crazy ass idea that nobody else seems to be brave enough to do, and look at this person who did it, and did it with zeal, with style, with like real technical prowess. I don't know, man. It's these type of directors that end up getting shafted later on in their careers too, because they continue to stay underground.
Well, also the danger I think is too is that you got to make the passion project, you got to make the big one that keeps your name in light. So for every Schindler's List, there had to be a Ready Player One.
Yeah. Which
Which,
is a rewatchable movie too. I kind of like that movie.
yeah,
Don't get it. It's fine. It's a fine movie.
the movie is more rewatchable than the book is rereadable. I liked the book was a prime example of what I was talking about with Moulin Rouge. I loved the book the first time I read it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I watched it or read it a second time. I was like, that was so good. I'm going to reread it. And I realized it was a reliance on my own sense of nostalgia to generate emotion. And that it happened a little in the movie, but the movie was the book, to where I'm like, yeah, I can rewatch it and it's still entertaining. But it was that same idea for me where it was like, is that a great moment? Do I feel great about it, or do I like it because you referenced a movie that I too love?
Yeah, I get that. It feels like a cheap hook almost.
Well, and it is, and actors or directors, they use it all the time. It's actually, to me, one of the biggest challenges of independent filmmaking is that you aren't using familiar actors. You aren't using names, so I can't cheat and make the audience immediately love Arneet's character because it's Arneet.
Yeah.
His family will feel that way, his friends will feel that way, but I can't go, well, I don't really have to develop this Chris Pratt character because it's Chris Pratt and people
Right.
Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
And again, it's nothing against Chris Pratt, but it is an over-reliance on
using a brand to build a brand.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
original.
That's just brand marketing. That's not art.
Yeah.
That's going, oh, I identify with this Campbell soup can drawing because I too know what a Campbell soup can looks like.
Right. But I think it's interesting that you bring that up then, because I mean, Scott Pilgrim is based on a set of graphic novel and comics. Like it's
Right.
based on existing IP. But what I think makes it work and what makes it so rewatchable is that when Edgar Wright came in and directed it and made it, he put his own ideas and style into it. And I think as long as you're taking existing IP, or as long as you're taking somebody else's idea and you're putting your own spin on it, then it's imminently rewatchable because it feels authentic. And it's kind of like how Jimi Hendrix took All Along the Watchtower from Bob Dylan. He could have just played it the same way Bob Dylan did, but he didn't. He infused his own sense of color and dynamism and personality in it. And now to this day, Bob Dylan plays Jimi Hendrix's version of his own song.
Well, and it's on that same note, it's Hurt by Nine Inch Nails, as done by Johnny Cash. And
Beautiful.
Trent Reznor has said on more than one occasion that it's not even really a cover anymore. That's his.
Yeah.
It's no longer my song.
And that is, I can't speak enough about people doing their own, like the idea of remixing art in your own identity it's a beautiful thing to me, and not a lot of people can do it either.
No, and there's ways of doing it. I ragged on Andy Warhol, but he tried something, and it's more that there was some artist who just blew up a piece of a Marlboro ad, and that was their thing, and they're like, yeah, and people are like, this is brilliant. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, it is not. Well, no one else thought of it. I'm like, there's the difference between no one else thinking of something and no one else doing it. Because sometimes you just go, no, that's not art. I literally just press the zoom button on my Xerox machine.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will go face to face questioning. Well, I mean, what is art? I mean, that's a whole artist. It's literally in the eye of the beholder. So, I didn't care for the 50 Shades of Grey movie, but that is art to someone. Sure. And that is okay. That is fine for them if it can find its market.
Yeah, and it definitely did 3 times.
3 times that someone took a fan fiction of Twilight that they had written, got rid of the vampires, and added bondage.
It's the craziest thing to me that's a near $1 billion franchise. And that's for a different podcast, though.
Hey, we were rewatching the TV miniseries Dinotopia and realized that James Cameron pulled an extreme amount of that stuff for Avatar. We were just like, wait, there's flying pterodactyl things that you have to bond with and do a trust flight, and one guy ends up riding the unrideable special magical one? This sounds awfully familiar.
Wait, are you...
Yep.
He just straight up ripped it out of there.
Straight up ripped it out. I mean,
Wow.
it's hard to prove it, but the books were around. I just know we watched it. We're like, wait a minute.
Well, how about this? How about we talk about an eminently original, straight out of the brain can idea?
You were talking about Knives Out, sir.
This is why we're perfect for each other. Yes, Knives Out. Maybe the best movie of last year, or at the very least, the best written movie of the last year.
Well, actually, I guess on my list, the next several are all completely out of the brain, but
Oh, totally. But I think Knives Out takes the cake for originality.
yeah, and thankfully proved again to people that without studio influence, a director knows what they're doing. Like, everyone gave Rian Johnson so much like flack for what he did to
The Last Jedi, which I will stand for every time the debate comes up.
I thought it was great.
I thought it was incredible. And that's because I'm somebody who's progressive and wants new ideas.
Well, yeah, and that was, for me, it was a breath of fresh air because The Force Awakens felt like fan service.
A New Hope revitalized.
Well, yeah, and not just that, it was like, it's been an issue. It was the same issue I had with Rogue One. It was the same issue I had with Solo, the Star Wars story, is that I'm like, everything in the canon didn't need to be important. Everything doesn't have to mean something. But there was all this like, can you believe what Rian Johnson did to the story? Can you believe he just took whatever this was and made it nothing? Oh, can you believe this? And I'm like, what I can't believe is that you think Disney somehow just let him do whatever he wanted and didn't look at the script until the world premiere.
They not only did they let him do what he wanted to do, because he's the only screenwriter aside from George Lucas who got to write an entire Star Wars feature film, and then on top of that direct it and give him a $200 million budget for it. But they want him to develop his own trilogy of Star Wars movies. That's how much they trusted the process and what he was thinking about. That's the director who made Knives Out. And anybody who has seen that movie will absolutely see what I'm talking about. He's a genius when it comes to crafting like real depth in characters. And on top of that, he spun the craziest mystery story I've seen in such a long time.
Yeah, I would be lying if I didn't say wanting to make The Dark Places wasn't partially inspired by, I want to do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not going to do that because what he did was remade an Agatha Christie. What I wanted to do was something that felt a little more, what would Hitchcock do today? Long takes, like pulling on that kind of stuff. And mainly just because, I don't need to do another Knives Out. Knives Out did Knives Out.
Yep.
And did it really, really well. But there's points where when we watched it a second time and a third time and a fourth time, we were just like, oh, no, it's right there. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, the whodunit is right there.
Absolutely.
There's no question about it.
So for anybody who hasn't seen it, it is just like a straight up murder mystery pulled out of your favorite 40s, 50s, and 60s movies about the murder of a very, very rich man and all of his heirs, his entire family and in-laws trying to get in on the inheritance. But the movie actually is focused around his caretaker, who's played by Ana de Armas, who is incredible in the movie. A wonderful actress who was able to portray sweetness and innocence, and then also simultaneously somehow be this like really strong, confident figure who takes on an entire family of would-be murderers. And on top, the cherry on top of that is Daniel Craig doing his greatest, most outrageous Southern accent as the detective, whose name I'm forgetting right now. Blanc, that's right. Weird mix of Louisiana, Alabama drawl, but like...
And they just, Chris Evans flat out just calls him out on the foghorn leghorn.
Everybody realizes how crazy it is. And when's the last time that you heard in the press and media an original movie character tabbed to be the center of like a string of movies? Like the next sequels are going to be like Rian Johnson wants to write Blanc in many more murder mysteries. And I would...
It's his new Poirot. And we haven't had that in a while. Like... The closest thing we've had to a new Poirot in a while was Kenneth Branagh and the popular kids doing Hercule Poirot with the wrong mustache. I like him. I thought Murder on the Orient Express was a beautiful movie. Mm-hmm. I'll go see Death on the Nile when it comes out. Mm-hmm. But as a Hercule Poirot fan, I hated the mustache because I'm like, that's not. It's a little tiny mustache. It is a little tiny mustache, and he takes tiny little steps, and this is what he does. I like Kenneth Branagh, but I don't like his. He will cast people wrong for a role because they are popular and he wants to work with them, and I'm like
Natalie Portman in Thor.
Like Natalie Portman and Thor, like most of the cast in Much Ado. I like Keanu Reeves. That was not a good role for him.
Fake ass British accent. There's so much wrong with that movie.
Inconsistent. I've seen it more than once.
Yeah.
Especially when he stopped using his ex-wife Emma Thompson. She was great. Like he cast her in all this stuff, and I'm like, good thinking.
And she's also a chameleon who could fit any role. That's another great thing about Knives Out, though, is the casting is so good. You know?
People that I did not expect to be as great as they were.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, what's his name? Jamie Lee Curtis's.
Oh, Don Johnson.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like Don Johnson. Where did you pull Don Johnson? His daughter had more of a career than he did at that point. But
yeah, no, I mean, like Chris Evans coming off of Captain America and the Avengers, who like I am such a huge fan of him too.
Yeah.
So I was curious to see what he was going to do with the rest of his career because he's so synonymous with Captain America now. Like he is my Captain America. And then he comes in and Knives Out and is this like pretty spoiled rich brat who drives like this sick ass BMW and ends up.
You hate and love the whole movie.
Oh, it's so.
You're like, I want to hate you, but you're so like, it's that.
So charming.
I will work with you. I will, as long as there is a role. I'm slowly working on my next feature, apparently starring Lee Pace and Chris Evans.
Yes. I would watch the shit out of that. I don't even care what the plot is, just those two going off each other.
We'll put Ryan Reynolds in it. It'll be 12 angry men. Only it won't be angry. I'll be like 12 slightly irritable men.
Oh my God. Just mildly annoyed men. No, but and the thing is all of those actors played the hell out of their parts. And the great thing about the Rian Johnson script is none of the characters really felt like they were just throwaway or there for the sake of plot necessarily. They were their own human beings. And I think that's something that, especially in an ensemble movie, really lacks in other films of the genre and other examples.
Well, and one thing that he did that I tried to draw from in The Dark Places that I think worked. You have to make a balance between characters being a stereotype and characters being dynamic. Mm-hmm. Because almost everyone skews too far one way or the other. Mm-hmm. So with this, I presented, going back to Dark Places, I presented the writer with the challenge of, these are the stereotypes I want, make them human. If they do something, that's great. I want that. I think it's hilarious. But
that's who she is at the end.
That's who she is.
Yeah.
Why did she do it? And so we add a scene later. It changed. The pace just like drops out of everything else we've seen. And it's very unspoken quietness. Please, I'm hurting that this character needs. Mm-hmm. And again, anything that we did in 3 weeks' time, I don't expect to be the lifelong passion project that Rian Johnson came out with. But
with The Dark Places, we did everything that we could within our power. I think we all put our whole heart into it, and it is hard to do in such a short time period. But that Knives Out is the example of what can be done when you have the right time and the right investment. It's clear that all of those actors were so into the story, and like even they were as interested in getting to the final product as the director, as Rian Johnson was. But it's also why movies like Avengers work. So one movie that I actually haven't seen that was on the list, but I've always been keen to watch, I just never got around to it, is Gosford Park. Talk to me about that, because I've also heard divisive things about that movie.
Have you?
Yeah. I mean, some people love it, some people hate it. The majority, I know it was nominated for Best Picture in 2001. I think it lost to Russell Crowe's A Beautiful Mind, which admittedly, tangent, was not the strongest movie year. So I didn't give it too much credit.
Yeah. Gosford Park, it's an interesting movie because I had avoided it when I saw clips of it or stuff. It fell into that English Patient. It's a slight period upstairs, downstairs. It's the reason I don't watch Downton Abbey. And that is for some people. It is not for me. Mm-hmm. However, the thing that sold me on it was my wife. She was like, no, you need to watch this. You need to watch this. And I was like, okay, I'll sit down. And the first thing I noticed that I hadn't paid attention before was that it was a Robert Altman. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I have a lot of respect for what he does. It's a very unique style that I think can be hit or miss. But I watched it and I enjoyed it and didn't really give too many more thoughts about it. But then I wanted to watch it again a few years later. And then it was actually The Dark Places that made me want to watch it again, because our writer, I was like, what are we thinking? What do we need to do? What's going on here? She's like, well, it's about the busyness. It's about all of the stuff going on. How do we make a cacophony? How do we do this? A la Robert Altman. And I was like, well, which Robert Altmans are you thinking are kind of influencing in you? She's like, well, a little bit MASH, but a lot Gosford Park, because there's a murder involved. So we should look at Gosford Park. And we went back and rewatched it, and sure enough, the thing that makes Gosford Park so rewatchable is that those characters just have their own lives. And what's really, really interesting to me about it, that made it and made me want to sort of draw in on my own picture, was this idea that you have a central character of any story, and most writers, most directors, most everyone go, here's a central character and the world revolves around them. But Robert Altman has this gift for going, here's the central character and here's this other person in their life who has their own life, and this person has their own life, and these have their own lives. Yeah, I mean, without giving stuff away, there are things happening in backgrounds of The Dark Places and Gosford Park that are connected, that maybe come out to light as a big important detail later, but they don't always. Right. And sometimes it's just someone reacting, two people having a conversation in the foreground, and someone else is 30 feet behind him and they say something, you just see him go. And then like 45 minutes later, it was like, oh, it's like blah, blah, blah keeps talking about, and you're like, they referenced the fact that they were listening into a conversation, but we saw that. We just weren't looking for it because we were so fixated on what was right in front of us, what was in focus. Right. And so the rewatchability is about going, look beyond. Now, the challenge is, it was easier for me because I couldn't cast extras in this film.
Yeah.
I really suppose my cat is the only extra in the film.
It does play it. I think it's more of a cameo than an extra.
Well, she just literally shows up, and here's the scene, if you really, really look for it, where it's supposed to be a tense moment, and I kind of look down to the left and move, and I'm shooing the cat away with my foot.
Yeah, so
dramatic moment, and you're like, go away, you can't jump on my lap in the tank. And she's like,
right. Another technical constraint of filming in your own home.
Yeah, well, I mean, the dog is a character in the film purely because she was going to be in that film.
Right. You weren't going to keep her out.
A lot of time trying to explain to her that it's very unprofessional to look right into the camera lens.
Heidi will get there. Don't even worry. Give her a little more training. She'll be fine.
Yeah.
But
I want my own trailer.
Gosford Park, I mean, I know what it's about, and from the sounds of it, it is a murder mystery on par with. It's not a whodunit, but it definitely fits in the vein of like an Agatha Christie novel.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely influenced by, but it's almost like the murder's the least important part.
It's more about the characters.
It's really more about the characters, but that's also very Robert Altman-y. I feel that the plot always comes secondary to the life of the characters.
So if people were into Knives Out, I feel like they could translate over to Gosford
Park. Absolutely worth a watch. It's funny. That's what I don't think was properly conveyed, is that, again, it still has that sort of Downton Abbey-ish aesthetic, upstairs, downstairs situation, but it's funny. You will laugh at it a lot. And they do a great job of making you not go, oh, we're so rich and great, and you servants are terrible. It's, we servants are great, and you rich people are pathetic.
Bad Times at the El Royale kind of tries to do the same thing, and it does it in a really weird way that shouldn't work, but it kind of does.
I did not. I mean, I knew I was going to somewhat like it. I did not expect to like that movie as much as I did.
I picked it out of thin air. I was just like, oh yeah, the cover looks kind of nice. You know, those, like, you pick up a book just because, oh yeah, the artwork is kind of cool. It's that movie. I went into it, and immediately I'm hooked because John Hamm is in it, and I'll watch anything with John Hamm because he makes some really weird choices after Mad Men.
I don't like John Hamm, but I keep kosher, so
he just there's
it's a joke. Like John Hamm.
No, I get that. I'm continuing with it because that is a joke.
You're ignoring it.
It's a joke that we all know is a joke because who doesn't love John Hamm? But he, like, I just watched him in The Town, and he plays an FBI agent, and he fucking kills it. He's in a Disney movie, and he's probably the only good thing about it, a baseball movie. And then he comes in this, and he's playing like a less than dominant officer of the law, and he's so integral to the start of the movie, and you buy into him immediately. And the whole, even just the vibe, the setting of the movie, the isolation of it is immediately compelling.
God love him. It is the best thing I've seen Jeff Bridges do in so long.
So good.
Well, and that to me was the like, I had to rewatch it several times because the first time I watched it, I couldn't get over the performances this director had pulled out of people.
Oh my God.
Like, people I love that I'm like, oh, you're good. I didn't know. Jeff Bridges is a perfect example. I've followed Jeff Bridges for ages. I didn't see that coming from him. Yeah, iconic wise, to me, this is going back to Lebowski days, as far as like, this is this character and you got him complete, and the emotional range that he goes through and the way you feel as an audience member about him. But
so you're saying in a quarter century, this is the best role he's had?
Maybe.
Because Lebowski was 82, right?
I just know that Lebowski was such an iconic character, and then he kind of was playing that for a while, and this is like, and then he got out of playing that and was doing some other stuff, and I'm like, okay, these are great. I enjoy these. Again, True Grit, he did a great job. It's always hard when you're remaking an iconic film. So yeah, for me, I was just like, with some of the stuff he was pulling on that. Same with Dakota Johnson. I only knew her from the 50 Shades movie, which I watched drunk one night because I felt the need to. I'm one of those people that believes firmly that if you only watch good movies, you will be trying to reach a finish line as an artist that you may never get to. But if you can watch the bad stuff, you can learn from other people's mistakes. And I will go on record saying I thought 50 Shades of Grey was a terrible film.
I watched 50 Shades sober. You don't have to qualify it. I watched it because I wanted to.
Is that the fourth one or the third one?
I think I just watched the first
50
one.
50 Shades Freed, 50 Shades Sober, 50 Shades Drunk Off Their
Sober is one of the only way you know how to joke about that is if you actually knew what the titles were.
I only know the second title because I made a joke because a friend of mine's last name is Freed. And so I took a picture of him and another guy hugging each other that we had from play. It's like, oh, it's the new poster, 50 Shades Freed. And he's like, oh my God.
Oh, that's great. No, I like the reason that
Chris
I like
Hemsworth, his performance in it. You're just like, he was another prime example. I like Chris Hemsworth. I think his Thor is fun. I didn't know he had that performance in him. Because he's essentially playing Charles Manson.
He played, dude, absolutely. He's so sinister and he's so evil, but he's also so like
charming. You get why
charming.
People, you get how that happens. And that's what I thought was so great, because there have been too many Charles Manson things. It's when, what's his face? I can't remember the guy's name right now. Zac Efron. We certainly played Ted Bundy, and there was this big like backlash that he was too attractive and too charming, and everyone's going, that's
who he was.
This is how he got away with what he did. This is why he's dangerous. Ted Bundy wasn't that attractive, and they put a picture up, and like, for the time period, he kind of was.
And let's not bury the lead either, because this movie certainly did. Hemsworth doesn't show up until the second half of the movie,
right?
And he basically steals it by the end. He's got it in a sack and walks away a free man.
The best part about the film, I think, is the fact that we've just told you a whole lot of stuff and we have given nothing away to the plot. Like the fact that he's Charles Manson, you figure out in like a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Because his character's been talked about for so long that when he shows up, you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. The thing I was going to say about Dakota Johnson, though, is like because of those 50 Shades movies, and that's kind of like, that was most people's introduction to her. Going from that character and then seeing what other things she can do, and like, she's dynamic. They didn't direct her at all in the 50 Shades movies. She was left to her own devices and was like this curled up little ball the whole time. And like in every other movie I've seen her in, she is confident, take charge, like just such a colorful actress when she gets on screen. I've loved her ever since I've seen this movie, and I'm going to love her in every other one because I think she has the same tenacity that her dad does. You know, where it really is like, I don't care what you think about me. I am who I am.
I was Nash Bridges.
Right. Exactly. But that she makes the movie. She makes her role so fun to watch. And Cynthia Erivo also. Her
She's the one that
first.
plays the sister.
She's the I think
Or
or the singer. The singer.
The singer. Oh my God, I really did not know who she was.
She just got nominated for an Oscar for playing Harriet Tubman.
Oh,
She's the one. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I hadn't. I'm bad about following actors' careers, but she was someone I was like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
Why don't I know who you are? And you want that in a movie where it's just like, and I want to say to whoever's watching, listening right now, is that to me, one of the biggest standouts about all the movies that I think we've talked about so far is that for being able to discuss them so academically, so like, you know, Arnett and I sitting here waxing philosophical about the aesthetics and all this stuff. These are just enjoyable movies, and that's what
super entertaining.
Because that's a big thing for me as far as like the movies I watch is that it can't just be pretty. It can't. I've seen a lot of movies that are very pretty, and I go, "Oh, this is beautiful."
There's no substance.
Where is it? You know,
Yeah.
or these a lot of films that get nominated for Oscars. Nothing that we've talked about was nominated for an Oscar, as far as I know.
I think Gosford Park, Best Picture.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Scott Pilgrim for some technical awards. Definitely not the last one we're going to talk about. Knives Out was nominated. We'll get there.
Like, what do you mean? Oh.
Yeah. No, we'll get there, and you'll all know. Definitely not Bad Times. Knives Out, rightfully so, was nominated for Best Writing last year, but I think
it didn't get it. It lost
to Parasite.
I thought it lost to Jojo Rabbit.
No, because Knives Out isn't. No, it's not adapted. It was nominated in original screenplay.
Oh, so different categories. Jojo Rabbit was
adapted from a book, so it's adapted screenplay. Which Jojo Rabbit, at some point, for all of you guys, I will talk about it because it's definitely like it's divisive enough that there's a debate to it and an argument to it, whether you like it or not. But I think it's a beautiful movie, and I want to convince you to come to the dark side of the force on that one.
I'm 100% with you on this one. Is that all the people that are like, yeah, but it's just all like it's pro-Nazi. Like, it is not pro-Nazi.
Anybody who says that just completely misses the point of that film.
It's the whole point is how ridiculous they are.
Mm-hmm.
That Heil scene where I think in like a minute and a half they say Heil 31 times.
So good. I actually followed along with that movie with the script. I downloaded it online, and the script has Heil written in for every character, including Gestapo 1, Gestapo 2, Gestapo 3. Like, that was all in.
Well, you don't cast Stephen Merchant in a movie if it's gonna be taking anything that seriously. The guy's great, but
genius.
I just replayed Portal 2 and I was just like, you are so ridiculous.
He's so good. Oh my god. But before we lose everybody, because this is going longer than I thought it would, Snakes on a Plane. And this is why we were saying it has not won an Oscar, but we are probably not alone when we say it is maybe one of the greatest and also dumbest rewatchable movies in the world.
It's so good. That's the thing. Like, all the things that make a picture great, it has. Visually, it's stimulating. The writing, this is to me where that movie succeeds better than most movies I've seen, is that most films don't know what they are. Like, even like the bad B movie style, like cheaply made horror film, Lava Lantula, the earthquake that ate Paris, whatever ridiculous movie you want, they are somewhere along the line, someone involved in the process thinks that they are making something better than what they're making. Or you get movies where you can see the people in them going, I am so much better than this film. Mm-hmm. The people in Snakes on a Plane knew they were making a movie called Snakes on a Plane, and were happy about that fact. They didn't take themselves overly seriously, but they also didn't sit there and give the side eye to the audience the whole time going, I mean, you know, I'm better than this, right? They committed just as fully as they would have to anything else they did. It showed. to me.
Yeah.
Bobby Cannavale, who's gone on to make, he's been an Ant-Man. He's really just kind
Won
of
an Emmy for Boardwalk Empire a while back.
great work, is having a blast in it and is doing a great job. And
that's
the
the other thing
writing
is the actors, you can see them, they're having as much fun making the shit as everybody else is. They're there for the ride the whole time.
But it's rewatchable because sometimes you just want to shut your brain off and watch something that ticks all those boxes of making a good film without also having to make you think.
Yeah.
And there's no thinking in Snakes on a Plane, and they know that. And that's why, there's the whole story that the studio was like, oh, we got Samuel L. Jackson. We need to rechange this. Let's call it Terror on Flight 1083. And he goes, I will quit this film if it is not called Snakes on a Plane.
Is that true?
He took the role supposedly without ever reading the script, just because he got sent a script that said Snakes on a Plane. He's like, I'm in.
That's awesome.
And the funniest part is that Snakes on a Plane is apparently a real term to describe the electrical cabling conduits that run underneath the thing. All of the overwinding colored conduits that, like, if you look down in a plane, connects the ailerons to the flaps.
Looks like a snake.
And they're like, oh, the snake's on a plane. And I believe that's where the term came from originally.
I mean, either way, like, because of that title, do we even really need to sit here and talk about what the plot is?
It's about snakes on a plane.
And that's the magic of it. Even if you've never seen it before, never heard of it before, if you see it on Netflix, Amazon, whatever, and you see that title, you're like, yeah, okay, because it's telling me what it is. There's no guesswork involved. And Sam Jackson is so iconic in every line that he says in that movie, right down to actually saying the title of the movie.
The brilliant song. It should have been nominated for an Academy Award, in my opinion, because I was like, this is catchy and great. And there's a music video that's just as great, and I love everything about it.
But I think, wouldn't you think that, like, the people that made this movie, they would also, like, this is a conversation that I want to have with everybody in the world who is an artist, is like, if you are looking for critical acclaim, you are not going to get critical acclaim, and certainly not as often as you think. It's like when you write a song, you can't go into it saying, I'm going to write a number one song, because more often than not, it's not going to happen for multitude of reasons. A, you overthink it. Two, you take yourself too seriously.
No.
Your ego gets involved.
Yeah. This is a conversation you and I have had a lot before, is that if you are seeking fame, you will not find it. If you are seeking glory, because you're only chasing what you think other people will accept. So you're right. Your bar is here. It's visible. To me, fame comes from being groundbreaking, from challenging what else is out there. It's not looking at, and conversely, it's also not looking at what is everyone else doing. I'm going to do something different. It's just the way you go, I have this thing I have to do. Mm-hmm. I have this movie I have to make. There's
something inside me that I need to get out.
Yeah.
And that is artistry at its core.
Yeah. I, even as an artist, I've made shorts and features and stuff that I was just like, yeah, my heart wasn't as in it. And that's why I couldn't direct it that well, because I was like, I like it, but it's not my dream. It's not my passion. It's not my goal. I want this. And
I think two conclusions you can draw are, first is, if you are looking to find acclaim, be award worthy, be praiseworthy, then it's not going to happen, because if you're chasing that, you're not chasing what's actually going to make you reputable, right? If you are out there to make art, if you're out there to express yourself, which is what this shit is, then you are going to be noticed. And the other part of it is, with Snakes on a Plane, the directors and the writers, they weren't looking for Oscar glory, because they just wanted to write some super cool shit. And you know what they came up with? Maybe one of the biggest cult movies in the last 20 years. The fact that we're talking about a movie called Snakes on a Plane in the year 2020, like nearly 15 years after it was made, that's a testament to real filmmaking. Mm-hmm. And it's a weird thing to say. And unless you've been on the ride with us this entire podcast, listening to what we've been talking about, you were not going to understand how that can make sense. But it's so true. And like, the more you think about it as a creative, the more you're like, you know what? none of what anybody else is saying matters. The way I feel is what's going to get me to the promised land.
There you go. There you go.
Is that the end of the podcast? Shit, we ended it on a good note.
I think we should. Also, I'm going to just throw out a suggestion. You may want a part 1 and part 2.
Yeah, probably.
Otherwise, it's an hour and a half.
I thought we were pretty entertaining. I felt like we were entertaining human beings this whole time.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you just got to think about whether or not you want to hold someone's attention for the whole length of time.
Yeah.
Is that the end? Can I turn the AC back on?
You know what? Yeah, let's just send him off. So again, his name is Ned Record. His new movie, The Dark Places, produced by Hollywood Shakespeare, is coming out May 14th on Amazon and Amazon Prime. It's going to be awesome, and we're going to be right with you on the release date, and let us know how we did. My name is Arneet Singh. I've been your host. This is the A-Sing Podcast, and I will see you all next week. Thank you so much for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see this guy again soon. Let's find out. Stay sharp, stay motivated. Peace out.